Udair's online, the gray area between maliciousness and ignorance, named for Albert Uderzo of Asterix and Obelix fame. Now, today, we are going to compare and contrast a work of comic satire and a Zack Snyder film to see whether or not Zack Snyder walks the Uderzo line or dances merrily or goose steps merrily across it. So, as I was beginning to read Frank Miller's 300 for the last episode of Media Musings, I was hit with a sneaking suspicion that Zack Snyder may have done at best, uncritical and surface level adaptation when he adapted it into film for his 2006 smash hit. Upon what, and I had already conceived of this idea to compare and contrast how the This Is Sparta scene is portrayed in the graphic novel with how it is portrayed in the film. And then I watched the film, and it was so much worse than I imagined. So, without further ado, we are going to begin with the depiction in the graphic novel, with a dramatic dramatic reading by yours truly. Barely a year ago, Sparta, uninvited guests. Show me to your king. I bring word from great Xerxes. I don't know. Our king's a very busy man, and he's got an acute sense of smell, Persian. Could we offer you a bath? I'm sure that our women have a perfume you'll find agreeable. Greek arrogance, it will be the death of you all. Be afraid. Sparta will burn to the ground. Only the word of King Leonidas can save it. He sounds serious. Maybe we should tell the king. Yeah, I suppose we don't want anybody saying Spartans aren't good hosts. The matched footsteps of the king's personal guard, the clatter and bickering of the marketplace cease. Barely a year ago. Earth and water. You rode all the way from Persia for earth and water. Don't be coy. Don't be stupid. You can afford neither. A force of men is assembled so massive it shakes the earth with its march. Its numbers so great it drinks the rivers dry. All the god king requires is a modest offering of earth and water, a simple token of Sparta's submission to the will of Xerxes. That's a bit of a problem. Rumor has it the Athenians have already turned you down, and if those boy lovers found that kind of nerve... After all, we Spartans have our reputation to consider. Still, I'd hate to be rude. There's got to be a diplomatic way to handle this. Choose your next words carefully. Of course, it's obvious. The answer's right in front of me. Earth and water. You'll find plenty of both down there. Madman, you're a madman. No man Persian, nor Greek, no man threatens a messenger. This is blasphemy. This is madness. This is Sparta. And Wilhelm scream. The children frolic. A war begins. Now, we'll begin with a disclaimer that obviously in doing a dramatic reading, I have thus, no matter how inadvertently, put my own spin on how the scene is being presented. Like, for instance, I decided to give the Persian messenger a British accent. That being said, I did that for the reason that to further amplify Miller's distinction between the Spartans and the Persians, and even the Spartans and the other Greeks. Frank Miller draws the Spartans, as opposed to even the other Greeks, as completely naked, save for their capes in most panels. Now, he's doing this in a way that to visibly depict the Spartans as less civilized than the Persians and even the Greeks, and even the other Greeks. So I felt I felt in order to be an authentic interpretation, I'd emphasize that by putting a more refined add to my voice while reading the Persian ambassador's lines. But so this entire exchange takes place over 2, maybe 3 pages, both of which are largely splash pages with little, panels interspersed amongst them. Now, so the messenger arrives. He is heckled by a couple of Spartan toughs just standing around, presumably some kind of official, because they're in enough, they can go fetch the king, so they have enough status to be able to go in to see the king, to let him know that an ambassador has arrived. And they stand there and heckle him, and this is emblematic of something that it's very important to do when watching 300, especially if you've read the graphic novel first. So because Zack Snyder has done such painstaking effort to directly copy the dialogue and visuals of the 300 graphic novel into film, you have to pay very close attention to see what he has omitted. Like, for instance, the exchange between the Persian messenger and the guards is completely absent from the film. And I found that in my comparison of the graphic novel and the film, Zack Snyder has almost surgically excised everything that makes Frank Miller's, graphic novel a satire of Spartan fascism, and thus, you know, we're we're kind of edging into that Durzo line where is Zack Snyder actually promoting or propagandizing fascism with with his adaptation of 300. Um, but what's more important is that Leonidas thinks he's being clever. In this depiction, the depiction of the graphic novel, Leonidas thinks he's being clever. Leonidas thinks that he's outwitted. He either thinks that he's outwitted the situation, or he's he's being an arrogant prick and just being cruel. Um, there, the earth and water, you'll find plenty of it down there. That's an example of Miller's adaptation of laconic wit, where there's a trope in the histories where Spartans always have, a snappy comeback because, like, for instance, there's a supposed exchange between Darius and one of the Spartan kings where he says, if I come to your lands, I will, scorch the earth. I will raze all of your cities. I will enslave all of your civilians. And the Spartan king replies with, if. And what's more important is this depiction puts largely all of the onus for the action and for the coming war upon Leonidas himself, and on his arrogance, on his fact that he feels insulted and thinks he's too clever by half, and just seeks to cut through the Gordian knot of this diplomatic problem by literally just murdering the messenger. And also it's undercut with with Miller's narration blocks saying, children are bickering, a war begins. Now, originally I was only going to do this comparison because it's a very famous scene. It's an iconic scene for a reason. But as I read through the graphic novel, and then later as I watched 300, because when I started reading the graphic novel, I was like, I need to see 300 to see how to compare, because Zack Snyder has kind of a yikesy reputation in regards to uncritically doing surface level adaptations of dark comic satires, and thus making them more fashy, making them more blatantly fascistic in terms of propaganda. And as I went through this deep as I go through this deep dive in comparing the two, it's emblematic of the translation of 300 as a whole from page to screen, where Zack Snyder has, where when Zack Snyder removes the jabs that let you know that this is a satire, that this is not meant to be taken, at face value, that Miller is poking holes in the fascistic Spartan eugenics ideal, and instead goes to reinforce the idea of Western nationalism against the unwashed hordes of the East. Ooh, scary. And the the American public of the early years of the global war on terror ate it up. And with that, we're going to start with our dissection of how Zack Snyder chose to adapt this scene. And while it may be accurate to a certain degree to an accurate interpretation to Miller's depiction, it is not an authentic one. And for more discussion on that, look back to our classical reception primer. Generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses. Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction.